On a rain-slick Thursday evening in November 1929, in a second-floor private room above a shuttered speakeasy on West 134th Street in Harlem, two men shook hands across a table, scarred with cigarette burns and the residue of 1,000 illegal deals. One was Ellsworth Raymond Johnson, known on every block north of 100th Street as Bumpy, a black numbers runner, enforcer, and rising lieutenant in Harlem's underworld. A man who'd built his reputation with fists, blades, and an unshakable refusal to bow to white mob muscle. The other was Meyer Lansky, a Jewish immigrant's son from the Lower East Side, already whispered to be the coldest brain in organized crime, a man who saw empires where others saw chaos. The handshake lasted 3 seconds. By the time their palms separated, the architecture of New York City's criminal future had shifted. Within 72 hours, 4 men would be dead, 2 precincts would go on high alert, and the Italian syndicates that had ruled the liquor trade and protection rackets with iron discipline would realize too late that the map had been redrawn without their consent. The deal was simple and staggering: exclusive Jewish-black cooperation in Harlem narcotics, numbers baking, and loan sharking, bypassing the Italian bosses entirely, splitting profits 60-40, and guaranteeing mutual protection against any outside interference. The stakes were rumored $300,000 in monthly revenue. And by morning, the city understood this wasn't a bluff. This is a reconstructed account based on public reporting, historical records, and widely circulated accounts. Some details vary across sources. The spark that forced the handshake came 5 days earlier, on a Sunday afternoon in late October, when a 6-car convoy rolled up 125th Street, flying the colors of the Masseria family enforcers sent uptown to collect tribute from the independent numbers operations that had, until that moment, operated in a fragile truce with the Italian downtown syndicates. The lead enforcer, a squat Sicilian named Salvatore Maranzano's lieutenant known only as Carmine the Grip, climbed out in front of a crowded barbershop on Lenox Avenue and announced, loud enough for 24 witnesses to hear, that Harlem's policy wheels now owed 20% of gross receipts every week, payable in cash, no negotiation, no exceptions. He used a racial slur to describe the men he was addressing. He smiled when he said it. Within an hour, word reached Bumpy Johnson at a backroom card game on 139th Street. Accounts differ on his immediate reaction. Some say he folded his hand calmly and walked out without a word. Others claim he overturned the table and put a knife through the ace of spades pinned to the wall. What is certain is that by nightfall, Bumpy had sent word through 3 trusted intermediaries to every independent operator in Harlem: do not pay, do not negotiate, and do not back down. He promised protection, he promised retaliation, and he promised that no one, no matter how connected, no matter how feared, would collect tribute on black streets without black consent. But Bumpy Johnson, for all his muscle and reputation, was not naive. He understood numbers. The Italians had manpower, political cover, police captains on the payroll, and access to the bootleg liquor pipelines that flooded cash into every corner of the 5 boroughs. A standalone war would be bloody, costly, and most likely fatal. Harlem's independent operators were fierce, loyal, and willing to die before they surrendered sovereignty, but they were fragmented, undercapitalized, and outgunned. Bumpy needed an ally, not a patron, not a boss, an equal partner with resources, connections, and a shared interest in breaking Italian dominance. He found that partner in Meyer Lansky. Lansky had his own reasons to despise the old guard Italian families. For years, the Jewish syndicates, Lansky, Bugsy Siegel, Louis Lepke Buchalter, had been treated as junior partners, valued for brains and ruthlessness, but never given seats at the table where the real decisions were made. The Italians controlled the docks, the political machines, the import channels. They spoke in Sicilian at meetings and made it clear that blood mattered more than competence. Lansky, who had spent his teenage years running bootleg whiskey and building financial networks that turned street cash into legitimate real estate, had long believed the ethnic hierarchies of organized crime were inefficient, outdated, and most importantly vulnerable. When word reached him through a mutual contact that Bumpy Johnson was looking for a partner to shut the Italians out of Harlem, Lansky saw not a risk, but an opening. He responded within 24 hours, "Let's talk." The meeting was set for Thursday, November 7th, 1929. Location: neutral ground, a shuttered gin mill on 134th, owned by neither side, watched by both. Thursday, November 7th, 8:45 p.m. Bumpy Johnson arrives first, flanked by 2 enforcers, both armed, both instructed to stay downstairs. He climbs the narrow staircase alone, scanning for ambush points, exits, and lines of fire. The room is small, lit by 2 kerosene lamps, furnished with a single table and 4 mismatched chairs. No windows. 1 door. He waits. Thursday, 9:02 p.m. Meyer Lansky enters, accompanied by a single associate later identified as Benjamin Bugsy Siegel. Siegel remains at the door, arms crossed, eyes on the stairwell. Lansky sits across from Bumpy. Witnesses later reported that neither man smiled, neither man offered pleasantries, and neither man wasted time. Lansky reportedly opened with a single question: "Do you want war or do you want business?" Bumpy's answer, according to multiple second-hand accounts, was equally direct: "I want both, but business first." Thursday, 9:15 p.m. The negotiation begins. Lansky proposes a joint venture, Jewish capital and political connections combined with Blackstreet control and community trust. He offers access to his loan sharking networks, his Canadian liquor suppliers, and his accounting systems that launder cash through legitimate Bronx textile fronts. In exchange, Bumpy offers exclusive rights to operate in Harlem without interference, protection from rival crews, and a guarantee that no independent operator will deal with the Italians. Profit split: 60% to the Harlem operators, 40% to Lansky's syndicate. Lansky reportedly pushed for 50-50. Bumpy refused. Lansky accepted. Thursday, 10:33 p.m. The handshake occurs. No contract, no witnesses beyond Siegel and Bumpy's 2 men downstairs. The deal is sealed on reputation, mutual interest, and the understanding that betrayal means death. They agree to move immediately. Within 72 hours, they will jointly target Masseria-controlled liquor drops, numbers collection points, and protection rackets operating in Harlem and the Lower East Side. The message will be unmistakable. The old ethnic boundaries no longer apply. Friday, November 8, 2:20 a.m. A Masseria liquor truck is intercepted on 2nd Avenue near 14th Street. 3 men, 2 black and 1 Jewish, force the driver out at gunpoint, unload 60 cases of Canadian whiskey, and set the truck on fire. No shots fired. No casualties. Police arrive 20 minutes later to find the driver unharmed, the truck still smoldering, and no witnesses willing to speak. The driver refuses to file a report. Detectives note the unusual ethnic composition of the crew and file a memo marked Priority Review. Friday, 11:50 a.m. Carmine the Grip, the Masseria enforcer who delivered the Sunday ultimatum, is found unconscious in an alley behind a porch store on Mulberry Street. His jaw is broken in 2 places. His wallet, watch, and rings are untouched. Carved into his right forearm with a razor, in neat block letters, is the word Essex Steed. Police investigators document the wound and photograph the scene, but no arrests are made. Within hours, the image circulates through every precinct in Manhattan. The interpretation is immediate and chilling. The 60-40 split is now policy, enforced by violence. Friday, 6:10 p.m. Our Harlem Numbers Bank on 8th Avenue, previously paying tribute to a Masseria captain, announces publicly that it will no longer honor the arrangement. The owner, a 52-year-old Baptist deacon named Samuel Graves, tells neighbors he's under new protection now. When pressed, he refuses to elaborate. By sundown, 5 other operators follow suit. The rebellion is coordinated, confident, and backed by muscle no one can see but everyone can feel. Saturday, November 9, 1:35 a.m. 2 Masseria soldiers are ambushed outside a social club on 16th Street in East Harlem. Gunfire erupts from a passing sedan. Both men are wounded, one critically, shot through the lung, the other in the leg and shoulder. The sedan speeds west toward the river and disappears. Witnesses describe the shooters as mixed. At least 1 black, 1 white. Police flood the neighborhood, but no suspects are identified, no weapons recovered, no cooperation offered. The wounded men refuse to speak. The critically injured soldier dies in Harlem Hospital at dawn. His name is later reported as Dominic Ruggiero, age 29, a Masseria bagman responsible for liquor distribution north of 110th Street. Saturday, 9:40 a.m. Masseria family underboss Giuseppe, Joe the Boss Masseria, calls an emergency meeting at a Coney Island restaurant. Attendees reportedly include captains from the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Lower Manhattan. The topic is singular: Harlem. Masseria is described by later informants as enraged, humiliated, and determined to reassert control. He orders immediate retaliation, authorizes the deployment of 20 additional soldiers uptown, and places a bounty. Amounts vary, but figures between $5,000 and $10,000 are mentioned on the head of Bumpy Johnson. The meeting ends with a unanimous vote, war. Saturday 4 p.m. Meyer Lansky, informed of the bounty through his network of paid informants inside the Italian families, sends word to Bumpy Johnson. The message is terse: they voted for war, we move tonight. Bumpy's reply, delivered by courier within the hour, is a single word: good. Sunday, November 10, 12:05 a.m. A coordinated series of strikes begins. 3 Masseria-controlled speakeasies are firebombed simultaneously, one in Little Italy, one in the Bronx, one on the Brooklyn waterfront. No casualties, but tens of thousands of dollars in liquor inventory destroyed. Police receive anonymous tips minutes before each attack, ensuring the buildings are evacuated but arriving too late to prevent the fires. The precision and coordination stun investigators. One fire captain tells a reporter, off the record, this wasn't amateurs. This was a military operation. To understand why a handshake in a Harlem backroom could ignite a war that reshaped organized crime in New York City, you must first understand the 2 men who made it, and the worlds they came from. Ellsworth Raymond Johnson was born in 1905 in Charleston, South Carolina, the son of a Baptist minister who preached fire and brimstone sermons about sin, redemption, and the wages of the devil. The nickname Bumpy came early, some say, from a childhood head injury that left a permanent knot on his skull. Others claim it was a taunt that turned into a badge of honor. Either way, by age 15, Bumpy had fled north to Harlem, leaving behind a South that offered black men little more than sharecropping, Jim Crow humiliation, and the constant threat of lynching. He arrived in Harlem in 1920 just as the neighborhood was exploding into the cultural and economic epicenter of Black America. The Harlem Renaissance was in full swing: jazz clubs, speakeasies, literary salons, and an influx of migrants from the South who brought ambition, talent, and a determination to build something new. But beneath the glitter was a parallel economy, numbers running bootlegging, prostitution, loan sharking, and protection rackets. The police largely ignored crime in Harlem unless it spilled into white neighborhoods. The Italian mobs collected tribute but rarely intervened in day-to-day operations. Into this chaotic, opportunistic world, Bumpy Johnson arrived young, hungry, and fearless. By the mid-1920s, he had earned a reputation as an enforcer, quick with his fists, quicker with a knife, and utterly unwilling to back down from anyone, regardless of size, reputation, or firepower. He worked for a series of Harlem bosses, learning the rhythms of the street economy, which cops could be bought, which politicians needed campaign cash, which rival crews could be negotiated with, and which had to be eliminated. He was known for 2 things: his loyalty to the community. He never robbed local churches, never harmed women or children, never allowed his men to prey on Harlem's working poor, and his absolute refusal to bow to white mob control. He believed, deeply and publicly, that Harlem's profits should stay in Harlem's hands. By 1929, Bumpy was not yet the legend he would become, but he was rising. He controlled several numbers banks, managed a crew of 12 enforcers, and commanded respect on every block between 125th and 145th streets. But he was also smart enough to know that respect without resources was a death sentence. The Italian families had money, guns, and political cover. A lone black operator, no matter how tough, could be crushed. He needed leverage, he needed capital, he needed a partner who understood that ethnic loyalty was less important than mutual profit. Meyer Lansky was born Meyer Situoljansky in 1902 in Grodno, then part of the Russian Empire, now Belarus. His family fled pogroms and poverty, arriving at Ellis Island when Meyer was 9 years old. They settled on the Lower East Side, a teeming immigrant ghetto where Yiddish, Italian, Irish, and Chinese gangs fought for control of every block, every pushcart, every crooked penny. Meyer learned early that survival required 2 things: brains and alliances. By his teenage years, he had formed a partnership with Benjamin Bugsy Siegel, a volatile, fearless street brawler who provided muscle while Lansky provided strategy. Together, they ran craps games, hijacked bootleg liquor trucks, and offered protection to Jewish merchants who couldn't rely on the police. But Lansky was never just a thug. He was a thinker. He studied how money moved, how political machines worked, how legitimate businesses could be used to launder dirty cash. He read newspapers, studied accounting, and most importantly, recognized that the future of organized crime belonged not to the loudest gun, but to the smartest ledger. By the late 1920s, Lansky had built a reputation as the mob's accountant, a man who could turn street profits into real estate, stock portfolios, and offshore bank accounts. He worked alongside Charles "Lucky" Luciano, an Italian underboss who shared Lansky's belief that the old mustache patiste the Sicilian bosses who clung to ethnic hierarchies and blood oaths were holding everyone back. But Lansky was also pragmatic. He knew the Italians would never fully accept him as an equal. He was useful, but he would always be an outsider. When Bumpy Johnson's intermediaries approached him in the fall of 1929 with a proposal to jointly control Harlem's underworld and shut the Italians out, Lansky didn't hesitate. He saw the opportunity immediately, a new territory, a motivated partner, and a chance to prove that ethnic cooperation could be more profitable than ethnic dominance. He also saw the risk. A partnership with a black operator would enrage the Italians, invite police scrutiny, and if it failed, mark him as a traitor to the fragile alliances that kept the Jewish syndicates alive. But Lansky had long believed that loyalty was a tool, not a virtue. Business came first. The handshake took place in a city reeling from transformation. Prohibition, enacted in 1920, had turned alcohol into liquid gold and crime into big business. The stock market had crashed in October 1929, just weeks before the meeting, sending the nation into an economic freefall that would become the Great Depression. Banks were failing, millionaires were jumping from windows, but in the underworld, demand for booze, gambling, and escape had never been higher. Organized crime in New York was dominated by Italian families, Masseria, Maranzano, and a younger generation of Italian-American mobsters like Lucky Luciano, who chafed under the old Sicilian bosses. The Jewish syndicates were influential but subordinate. Black operators in Harlem ran independent operations but paid tribute to the Italians for protection. The system was hierarchical, ethnic, and increasingly unstable. Younger mobsters wanted efficiency and profit, not blood oaths and old-world vendettas. The Italians wanted control. The Jews wanted respect. The black operators wanted autonomy. Into this volatile mix, Bumpy Johnson and Meyer Lansky introduced a radical idea that race mattered less than results, that alliances should be based on mutual interest rather than shared ancestry, and that the future belonged to those willing to break the rules everyone else took for granted. The handshake was not just a business deal. It was a declaration of independence. At the heart of the Johnson-Lansky alliance was a simple and staggeringly profitable ecosystem. The Harlem numbers racket, combined with loan sharking, bootleg liquor distribution, and protection services. Together, these operations generated an estimated $300,000 per month in gross revenue, roughly $4.5 million annually in 1929 currency, equivalent to over $75 million in today's money. Understanding how the system worked explains why the handshake was worth fighting for. The numbers game, also called policy or the policy wheel, was Harlem's economic engine. It worked like this. Every day, tens of thousands of residents placed small bets, often as little as a nickel or a dime, on a three-digit number between row 0 and 999. The winning number was determined by a publicly verifiable source, usually the last three digits of the total handle at a local racetrack, published in the newspapers. If your number hit, you won at odds of 600 to 1. The appeal was irresistible. For 10 cents, a domestic worker or day laborer could dream of winning $60 more than a week's wages. The math was brutal in favor of the house. With 1,000 possible numbers and 600 to 1 payout, the operators kept roughly 40% of all money wagered as pure profit. On a typical day, a mid-sized Harlem numbers bank might collect $5,000 in bets and pay out $3,000 in winnings, netting $2,000 tax-free, untraceable cash. But volume was everything. Running a successful numbers operation required street-level runners to collect bets from hundreds of locations, barber shops, beauty salons, shoeshine stands. Newsstands then deliver the cash to a central bank, calculate payouts, and distribute winnings. It required trust, speed, and protection. Any crew that could guarantee safety, fair payouts, and police non-interference owned a gold mine. Before the handshake, dozens of independent operators ran Harlem's numbers wheels. The Italians demanded tribute, but didn't manage day-to-day operations. The system was profitable but fragmented. Bumpy and Lansky proposed consolidation, a single coordinated network that pooled resources, standardized payouts, and eliminated competition. The result would be greater efficiency, higher profits, and ironclad control. Loan sharking and liquor. The second revenue stream was loan sharking, lending money at exorbitant interest rates to gamblers, small business owners, and desperate families who couldn't access bank credit. Lansky's syndicate specialized in this. A typical loan of $100 might require repayment of $150 within a month, a 50% monthly interest rate. Failure to pay resulted in broken bones, burned shops, or worse. The collateral was fear. Bootleg liquor was the third pillar. Prohibition had made alcohol illegal, but demand insatiable. Speakeasies, private clubs, and house parties across Harlem required a steady supply of whiskey, gin, and rum. Lansky controlled Canadian import channels. Bumpy controlled Harlem distribution. Together, they could deliver liquor at wholesale prices below the Italian competition, undercutting Masseria and building customer loyalty. The 60-40 split. The Handshake deal was structured as follows. Bumpy's Harlem crews would handle street-level operations, numbers, collection, enforcement, distribution. Lansky's syndicate would provide capital, launder profits through legitimate businesses, bribe police and politicians, and supply liquor. Gross profits would be split 60% to the Harlem operators, 40% to Lansky. The numbers favored Bumpy's side because the operations took place on his turf, relied on his community trust, and carried greater street risk. Lansky accepted the split because he valued long-term access over short-term percentage points. Assuming $300,000 per month in gross revenue, the split delivered $180,000 to Harlem and $120,000 to Lansky, enough to fund expansion, buy protection, arm enforcers, and still pocket enormous profits. More importantly, it shut the Italians out entirely. Every dollar that flowed through the Johnson-Lansky alliance was a dollar denied to Masseria. That was the real shock of the handshake, not just the alliance, but the exclusion. An exclusion in 1929, New York, was a cause for war. The New York Police Department's response to the Johnson-Lansky alliance was a study in contradictions, part willful blindness, part institutional corruption, part racist indifference. For years, the NYPD had treated Harlem crime as a containment problem, not a law enforcement priority. As long as violence stayed uptown and didn't spill into white neighborhoods or threaten white-owned businesses, detectives looked the other way. The prevailing attitude, documented in internal memos and later testimony before reform commissions, was that black criminals preying on black communities were policing themselves. But the handshake changed the equation. The attacks on Masseria operations, firebombings, shootings, hijackings crossed ethnic and geographic boundaries. Suddenly, Italian social clubs in Little Italy and Brooklyn were being targeted by mixed-race crews. Suddenly, the carefully managed system of payoffs and territorial boundaries that allowed the NYPD to collect graft while maintaining plausible deniability was falling apart. Precinct captains who had taken cash from Masseria for years found themselves under pressure from furious mob bosses demanding action. At the same time, Jewish and black enforcers were offering their own payments to look the other way. The result was paralysis. Some precincts cracked down on street-level operators, raiding numbers banks and arresting runners in performative shows of enforcement that accomplished little. Others doubled down on their Italian paymasters, feeding intelligence to Masseria crews about Johnson and Lansky movements. A few opportunistic cops played both sides, taking money from everyone and sharing information with no one. Internal investigations later revealed that at least a dozen detectives assigned to the Harlem and Lower East Side precincts were on multiple payrolls simultaneously, a level of corruption so endemic that reformers would eventually describe it as structural rot. For the broader Harlem community, the alliance provoked deeply mixed reactions. On one hand, many residents admired Bumpy Johnson's refusal to bow to white mob control. The numbers racket, for all its moral ambiguity, was seen as a community institution, black-owned, black-operated, and a rare avenue for economic mobility in a city where Jim Crow kept black workers locked out of unions, banks, and legitimate business opportunities. Bumpy was known for his generosity. He paid bail for arrested neighbors, donated to black churches, and enforced a code that forbade harming women, children, or anyone uninvolved in the underworld. Many saw him not as a criminal, but as a protector. On the other hand, violence was violence and bodies were bodies. The firefights, the reprisals, the escalating war between the Johnson-Lansky alliance and the Italian families put ordinary Harlemites in danger. Stray bullets didn't check loyalty. Firebombs didn't ask permission. Preachers, community organizers, and black newspaper editors called for peace, for legality, for an end to the cycle of bloodshed. The Amsterdam News, Harlem's leading black newspaper, ran editorials condemning all organized crime while simultaneously acknowledging that the Italian mobs had treated Harlem as a colony to be exploited. The moral calculus was impossible. Residents wanted safety, but they also wanted dignity. They wanted law and order, but not the racist law and indifferent order the NYPD provided. And so they watched, they gossiped, they chose sides quietly, and they hoped the war would end before it consumed them all. The deadline was approaching. No one knew who would blink. Scenario 1. Retreat. In this outcome, one side, most likely the Italians, calculates that the cost of war exceeds the value of the territory and pulls back. Masseria, facing coordinated attacks, internal dissent from younger mobsters like Lucky Luciano, who question his strategy, and mounting police scrutiny, could order a ceasefire and negotiate a new tribute arrangement that acknowledges Johnson and Lansky's autonomy in exchange for a reduced cut of profits. The alliance would hold, Harlem would remain under black Jewish control, and the Italians would refocus on more profitable ventures, dockside unions, construction rackets, Brooklyn gambling. This scenario is plausible because it saves face while preserving business. The cost, humiliation for Masseria, emboldening of rivals, and the precedent that ethnic boundaries can be redrawn by force. Observers believe this outcome is possible, but unlikely. Masseria's reputation as an old-school enforcer makes retreat politically dangerous for him internally. Scenario 2. Negotiated settlement. In this scenario, intermediaries broker a three-way split. The Italians retain a minority stake in Harlem operations. Bumpy and Lansky control day-to-day management, and profits are divided along agreed percentages with mutual non-aggression guarantees. Lucky Luciano, who reportedly respects Lansky and sees the value in ethnic cooperation, could serve as the broker. This outcome preserves everyone's income, stops the bloodshed, and sets a precedent for future alliances. The cost? Compromise. Bumpy gives up total autonomy. Lansky shares profits with former enemies, and Masseria accepts diminished control. This scenario is considered the most rational and therefore the most likely if cooler heads prevail. The challenge is trust. Each side would need to believe the others won't betray them the moment an opportunity arises. Scenario 3. All-out escalation. In this scenario, pride, revenge, and the logic of violence take over. Masseria refuses to negotiate, deploys overwhelming force into Harlem, and the Johnson-Lansky alliance responds with coordinated assassinations targeting Italian captains and financial assets. The war spreads across the city. Dozens die. Police are forced to intervene with mass arrests and crackdowns that devastate all sides. Federal authorities, already investigating prohibition violations, use the violence as justification for sweeping indictments. This scenario ends with everyone losing, profits collapse, leaders go to prison or die, and the power vacuum invites chaos. It's the worst outcome for business, but the most likely if ego and escalation override calculation. The cost is measured in bodies, sentences, and the destruction of the very empires everyone is fighting to control. Within the last 18 hours, sources close to the Masseria family report that Giuseppe Joe the Boss Masseria has issued a direct ultimatum to Meyer Lansky. Sever the alliance with Bumpy Johnson within 48 hours, or face total war not just in Harlem but across every Jewish syndicate operation in the 5 boroughs. The message was reportedly delivered by an intermediary to Lansky's Lower East Side headquarters late Saturday night, accompanied by a chilling addendum. Masseria has allegedly secured support from the Maranzano family, his longtime rival, creating a temporarily unified Italian front against the upstart alliance. If true, this represents a seismic shift. The two most powerful Italian bosses in New York, men who have spent years locked in their own bloody feud, are willing to set aside differences to crush the Johnson-Lansky partnership. Lansky's response, according to multiple second-hand accounts, was terse and unequivocal. He forwarded the ultimatum to Bumpy Johnson with a single line attached, "Your move." Johnson's reply has not been confirmed, but street-level sources report that Harlem enforcers have been mobilized, weapons distributed, and safe houses activated. One detective, speaking on condition of anonymity, described the atmosphere as pre-war tension, the kind you feel before riots or revolutions. Emergency meetings are reportedly underway on all sides. The 48-hour clock is ticking. By Tuesday morning, November 12, 1929, either a new deal will be struck or the city will wake to a body count that forces intervention from the highest levels of city and federal law enforcement. The deadline approaches, and so we arrive at the edge of the precipice. It is now late Sunday night, November 10th, 1929. Somewhere in Harlem, Bumpy Johnson sits in a safe house surrounded by armed men who have sworn to follow him into whatever comes next. Somewhere in the Lower East Side, Meyer Lansky calculates odds, reviews ledgers, and weighs the value of loyalty against the price of survival. Somewhere in Little Italy, Joe the boss, Masseria, sharpens knife and counts soldiers, convinced that violence is the only language these upstarts understand. And somewhere in the precincts, back rooms, and dimly lit offices where power is bought and sold, politicians, cops, and judges wait to see which way the wind blows, their palms open and ready. The handshake that shocked everyone has become the spark that could ignite the city. The deal was simple, 60-40, mutual protection, and the audacious belief that race mattered less than results. But belief, no matter how audacious, must survive contact with reality. And reality, in November 1929 New York, is a loaded gun pressed against the temple of an unstable empire. By Tuesday at dawn, we will know. Will the Italians retreat and accept a new order? Will intermediaries broker peace and carve the city into negotiated zones? Or will pride, revenge, and the logic of war turn the streets into a charnel house where no one wins and everyone bleeds? The numbers are in. The bets are placed. The clock is ticking, and the city holds its breath, waiting to see who blinks first and who falls. The deadline is 48 hours. History is watching.